Welcome to the first Vérité video interview, and I'm joined now by my very distinguished guest, David Lowery. He's the director of the spectacular and heart-swelling Ain't Them Bodies Saints, and he's somewhere in deepest, darkest France currently promoting the film. Hello, David.
Hello, how's it going?
Very well, thank you, and really nice to have you with us. I suppose I'd like to start by asking you a little bit about your European travels and how translators are probably having a nightmare with your title.
Well, so far the travels have been, let's see, where did we go? We went to Cannes, and then we went to the Karlovy Vary Film Festival in the Czech Republic, and then we went to the Munich Festival, and then I went to London last week to promote the movie because it opens there today, and now I'm in Deauville, France, for the American Film Festival here. And France is the only place thus far where the title has been enough of an issue that they translated it into a different, they changed the title. And here it's known as Les Amants de Texas. And that's in French, that's a beautiful title. So I'm happy. I knew going into this that the title was not going to cross over that well. So I'm surprised it hasn't been changed more often thus far.
And was that always the title? I know there's been a lot of talk about it and its origins, but have you always stuck with that since day one?
Yeah, that was always it. And initially I thought that it wouldn't last because I couldn't imagine any way in hell that anyone would sign on to a movie with this as the title, or that any distributor would put the movie out with this as the title. And somehow everyone just got behind it and decided to go for it. And for better or worse, that's the title that this movie belongs to, and the movie belongs to the title, and the yeah, so it's bound together at this point.
So you already mentioned, thank you for that, the movie opens today in the UK. Your name will be new to a lot of film fans, despite the fact that you have quite the prolific career already. I mean, you've already written and directed a feature, Saint Nick, numerous short films, and you've been a jack of all trades on an impressive roster of indie films, editing on Shane Carruth's Upstream Colour. My personal favourite, Sun Don't Shine, which I think is one of the best films of the year, thanks in no small part to your work. And Chris Swampeg's Empire Builder, which I finally caught up with recently. So for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about this prolific group of filmmakers that you've become associated with, some of the names and personalities, and maybe how that's informed you going into Ain't Them Bodies Saints?
Absolutely. I would credit it all to the South by Southwest Film Festival in Austin, where in 2005, I went there with a short film and met Joe Swanberg, who had his first film there, and Ty West, who had his first film there. And we all just became friends, and with them and with other filmmakers as well, like Brian Poiser and a handful of other folks. The Duplass brothers were there that year. And the connections that everybody formed there were incredibly strong and incredibly tight-knit, and it was remarkable how much we were all aspiring towards doing the same thing. We all wanted to make different types of movies, and we all had different interests, but we were all approaching it the same way, which is that we didn't want to wait for financiers to say yes. We didn't want to wait for an actor to sign on so that we'd get money. We just wanted to go make films because we loved making films. And because we loved making films, we also wanted to help each other succeed in those goals, so we all began to help each other. And so out of that, that closely knit group gradually began to expand and grow, and a few years down the line, Joe made a movie with Amy Siametz called Alexander the Last, and I met Amy working on that movie, and I was the only other crew member aside from Joe on that movie. And I became good friends with Amy, which then led to the collaboration on Sun Don't Shine. And, we worked together on other things as well, but it was just a situation in which we all were helping each other however we could. And at some point, I became well regarded as an editor. people liked what I was doing. They liked my movies. They liked the other movies I was editing, and started to ask me to cut their movies, and that was great because that was my favorite part of the filmmaking process. And it certainly did become a very important tool in my own development as a filmmaker because it taught me how to think as a filmmaker. It taught me how to um, look beyond my own immediate perspective and try to consider how other people might approach things and weigh the different options that I had at my disposal. And it, I don't know, it helped me develop my own voice. Even though I was working towards someone else's vision, it allowed me to distinguish myself as a filmmaker with something, hopefully something of value to say, but definitely something to say. And it's been great. I mean, I love having such a wonderful group of friends who are all incredibly talented, who make work that I enjoy watching, much less working on, and who are all achieving a remarkable degree of success right now. And it's nice to see that hard work pays off. And it's been a wonderful year of watching, you know, Amy going on to doing these television shows that she's on, and Shane having such a successful run with Upstream Color, and Joe having Drinking Buddies out, and Chris is working on a new script right now for another feature, and it's just a remarkable time period.
And that group, it just seems to get bigger and bigger because I was watching Hannah Fidel's A Teacher just the other night, and it should be noted our review is up on veritéfilmmag.com. And in the credits, your Saints producer James M. Johnson is there, and Kim Sherman is there also.
Yeah,
so I guess Hannah's part of that group now as well.
it's funny. My the assistant costumer on my movie was a co-producer on A Teacher. It's a very there's like all sorts of little connections here and there.
And with those connections, what I find really interesting about this group that you've talked about is that yeah, you're all friends and you're all supporting each other's success. But I was really yeah, quite touched by your tell people about what you did on Twitter recently when your own film and friends of yours had films out that very same weekend, a couple of weeks back.
Oh yeah, it was August 23rd. My movie was opening wider, and other films, including Short Term 12, Drinking Buddies, and You're Next, were opening. All of who I know the filmmakers of all of those. I'm friends with them. You're Next is, you know, filled with friendly faces. It's the entire cast seems to be made up of filmmakers that I know, and I really felt guilty just promoting my movie when so many of my other friends' movies were out there. I just, you know, on the business side of things, I should be telling people to go buy a ticket to my film, go pick my film first. But that was just disingenuous because there was so much other good work out there, and I was such close friends with so many of the people who'd made that work. And so I just decided to give a prize to anybody who would go see all four movies within the span of a single weekend. And I didn't expect it to actually catch on the way it did, but it kind of went viral, and a lot of people have done it, and that's great. It's great. I love going to see triple features and double features, and here's a chance to go see a quadruple feature, and I'm glad that a lot of people took me up on it.
So tell us about some of the strange and interesting props and things that people were getting sent for their efforts of seeing these films back to back to back.
No one's received anything yet because I've been out of the country. So when I get home, I've got a lot of mailing to do. But it started off just with I was going to take props from Ain't Them Bodies Saints, which mainly the police file that we have for Casey Affleck's character, which is a big thick folder full of mugshots and newspaper clippings and crime scene photos and all sorts of things like that. And I was planning on just taking something from that folder and doing an illustration on it to make it a little bit more personal and sending that to people. But the directors of the other films were quick to jump in and offer things as well. So we're gonna, I think, have a number of the animal masks from Your Next that are signed by Adam Wingard, some copies of the Short Term 12 soundtrack, and Joe Swanberg is sending a bunch of coasters from Drinking Buddies that he's signed. So hopefully all of those last long enough to get around to everybody. But it's, you know, luckily the police file is big, so at the very least we'll have lots of those.
That's fantastic. And you talked about how, as an editor, you were kind of honing your own voice on this film. And I did notice that in the editing of The Sun Don't Shine, for example, that there's a kind of fevered romantic tension that's there a little bit in Saints, and also in something like Empire Builder. Landscape is as much a character as it is in this film, although obviously with the budget on a much bigger scale. So with that in mind, the budget has got significantly bigger, but would you say that there definitely seems to be a visible emotional continuity?
Absolutely. I think that the continuity is absolutely there, and regardless of the budget, I almost find that that the budget curtails you to a certain extent because you have a little bit less freedom when you have a little bit more money. And so there were things that don't go as far as I would have liked, perhaps, but they're absolutely. I think it's actually, between Sun Don't Shine and Empire Builder, there's a perfect synthesis of my own instincts, which vary from formalism, precise formalism that is using a more Tarkovsky style method of letting a shot endure and letting the story build within the span of when you start rolling and when you cut, and letting that time affect the story and affect the movie in a very profound way. And then something like Sun Don't Shine, which is much more feverish and much more, there's a lot more confrontational edits in that movie, and it is all designed to provoke a response from one cut to the next. And the shots themselves are fleeting, and they're more fluid, and they come together in a almost decoupage style where everything's sort of flowing into one shot, flows into the next, and you're trying to build momentum from one shot to the next. And so with Ain't the Body Saints, I was sort of trying to balance both of those ideals and both of those aesthetics. And so you'll have moments where it does delve into a sort of slipstream approach, and other moments where we just let the camera roll and take in a landscape or take in a character in repose doing something, something intimate or something still. And finding the rhythm between those two modes was always the intent. That was always there in the script. That was always my idea, but it was still quite a challenge once we actually got around to actually editing the film.
And the film evokes, some of the classics of American cinema. Pretty much every other review, there's a mention of Badlands. But again, I go back to that certain dreamy quality. The film I was first thinking of was actually Robert Altman's Three Women. Not only in the sense that both films are really dreamy, but Saints is kind of, it's dusty and really beat up, like that film.
That's a remarkable comparison. I mean, I love Three Women. I think that's one of Altman's best films. And it's funny because I never would have thought of this film in comparison to that, except for the fact that when Rooney was studying accents, I gave her that movie I was like, use Sissy SpaceX accent. That's like exactly what you should look for. Something's happening outside. The dreaminess, though, absolutely. I mean, I love the fact that film can emulate the way the mind works, and the way the way I perceive dreams and memories to work, memory in particular. And with this film, I wanted it to be structured, even though there's nothing particularly surreal in the film. I wanted it to be structured as if it were a memory, as if it were the memory of another movie, perhaps, or the memory of something that happened in the past. And the way my brain works, the way I remember things, is what I was trying to represent in the way we put this movie together. And the things that come into focus, the things that are prominent, the things that we leave out, those are all just the way a pretty clear representation of how my brain processes narrative and information.
The image that's stuck with me when I think back, I saw the film a good few weeks ago now, is I was speaking about dust, and that does seem to be a major thing in the sense that the characters, they really do wear their costumes like a second skin. When you see the lovers pulled apart, you see Casey Affleck caked in sweat and dirt and toil, and that seems like such an interesting deliberate choice.
we absolutely wanted them to be filthy. That was, there was one point where we realized that Rooney wasn't dirty enough. We were like, oh, we've spent this whole movie not making her dirty enough. She put all this caked dirt on her hands, and we're like, that's what it should have been like the entire time. But yeah, we wanted that to be, as you say, a second skin. We wanted their clothes to look lived in. We wanted their clothes to be baked on. Once we realized that we'd be shooting the movie in the summer, I decided we needed to own that. And when you're in Texas in the summer, you sweat a lot, you get dirty, you just get disgusting, and that creates a look. There's a definite look to that, and that was something we wanted to embrace and take it as far as we could. And that helps it feel textured. It helps it feel lived in. It helps it feel, accurate and real. Even though so much of the movie doesn't feel real, it feels more heightened. But that is an aspect that I wanted that reality. I wanted that quality where you feel like you could reach out and touch. What it would feel like to touch that person or to touch those clothes and feel that dirt just caked on there.
Is that really time consuming, the practicalities of it?
It was maybe on day one, but on day two, they just had to, as long as the clothes didn't get washed, it was like, okay.
So people really did stink then, you're not exaggerating.
I'm sure we all smelled terrible, yeah.
So the film is really specific in terms of its details and its shot construction, and I'm wondering, does that mean that you have to be do you have to be quite exacting on the set to get that from people? And I mean in terms of making sure that all the department heads are on the same page. And as somebody who I'm presuming has not worked on a scale, of something this big before.
I mean, it was very lucky that I was able to hire pretty much anyone that I wanted to do anything on the movie. That was a tremendous luxury I had, especially as a director of doing a film of this scale for the first time. And so I think that all of that work was done in prep prior to shooting, and we really figured out what the movie needed to look like, what it needed to feel like. We all managed to get on that same page before we began shooting. And the production designer, Jade Healy, for example, is a really old friend of mine. She wrote and co-starred in Chris Swanberg's first film. It Was Great, But I Was Ready to Come Home. And I was down there in Costa Rica with her, and we just developed a really close friendship. And we've been hoping to work together on a movie ever since. And so finally this came together, and we just think the same way when it comes to these things. We have the same ideas. And so it was a matter of just getting people that I knew I would already be on the same page with, or that would be able to get there very quickly. So between myself, Jade, our costume designer, Malgosia, and Bradford Young, the cinematographer, it really was just a matter of spending the time and prep to make sure that we all were creating ideas that would not conflict with each other, and to make sure that they were all building towards the same thing. So color schemes in the sets and the wardrobe were very important. We did camera tests with all of them. We tested out, how they would work on camera, how they would work on different film stocks, and just all work together to create that look that we all knew we wanted. And so it was exacting. It was very exacting, but luckily we were able to all reach the same point of exaction early on, and exactitude, I suppose is the word. And so once we got to set, it was less a matter of trying to find that look as it was trying to figure out where to put the camera to make sure we were capturing that look as best as we could.
Knowing the backgrounds that you come from and the friends you have that we've already talked about, when I was watching the film, I couldn't help but at some points imagine the shoestring mumblecore version, if you will, where perhaps you've got Caitlin Schill in the Rooney Mara part and Kentucker Audley in the Affleck part. And that was fun to think about, but was that ever a reality in terms of, were you ever going to do this thing on a much smaller scale, or did the script simply demand that you had to kind of all step it up?
No, I absolutely was going to do it on a smaller scale. I was going to make it for not much more than I made my first film, Saint Nick. And Tucker was someone I definitely wanted for the lead. I was editing Bad Fever at the time, and I thought he was a tremendous actor. And I'm glad that he wound up in the movie regardless, and I can't wait to make a movie with him as the lead again. But the low budget version of it was always what it was written to be. And I don't think it would have been all that different. We wouldn't have been able to afford to shoot on film more than likely. Maybe we could have pulled off 16 millimeter, but it probably would have wound up being digital. And it would have been looser, a little bit more freer, and the script at that point had a lot more room for elaboration and for, you know, the actors to do a little bit more, to be a little bit more free flowing. I wouldn't go so far as to say improving, but it was going to be just a little looser than it wound up being. And I'm curious about that myself. I think about that frequently. Not that frequently, but there's not that I wish we had done that, but I do wonder what the movie would have been like. And I honestly think it would have been fairly similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I would love to see it in an alternate universe, or better yet, can you just a lead part for Kate next time? That would be great.
I would love to. I think she's marvelous. She's really, really marvelous.
I mean, the fact is, the only big screen I have seen her on is You're Next, which was released here last week, which she's in it for all of 10 seconds.
Yeah,
So,
she has the Kentucker Oddly part from Ain't the Body Saints.
yeah, he was worried he was going to get Malik'd out.
Yeah.
I saw on Twitter he was very worried about that. So did he actually get some bits cut out, or is that the entirety of his part?
That was the initially the entirety of his part. Then we brought him back and shot more footage of him, and a couple extra scenes, and then those scenes wound up getting cut out. So it was what he signed on for, and that's all on camera. And I'm gonna put the other material on the DVD.
Great. So what was it like going from working with people you know and get on with really well to, well, stars really, people like, you know, Mara and Affleck and you know, screen legends like Keith Carradine. I mean, you must have had a moment at some point on the set where you were just thinking, what on earth?
It was more the what on earth moment occurred right before I met them all for the first time in various coffee shops around Los Angeles. And once I met them, all of those, you know, imagined pretensions and imagined hierarchies sort of fell away, and it really became a case of me just hanging out with people that I like to spend time with. And, you know, it wasn't all that different from working on, you know, any one of the many low budget films I've worked on. The cast was all there to make the movie, and they weren't there to lend the movie their celebrity. They wanted to work and work hard and make a great film, and there was no sense of ego or vanity about anything on any of their parts. And so it really was remarkably similar. It didn't feel like working with movie stars, and perhaps that won't always be the case, but in this instance, I lucked into having, you know, a cast full of really remarkable people who I'm happy to call friends, and it was terrific, especially on the weekends. We'd all have dinner at our house, and we'd all cook and just hang out, and, you know, it would be such a strange mixture of folks like Casey and Rooney and Kentucker and David Zellner and all of these people that I've either known for a long time or recently gotten to know, and it all felt very communal and like we were all had been doing this for a long time. They fit right in, I guess I should say.
Who's the best cook?
We all pretty much just relied on my producer James to do all the cooking. So he's a chef. So
All right.
so Casey made some really delicious quinoa. I made something at some point. I don't remember what it was. I've made a salad, but we all just pretty much relied on the people that knew how to cook well, which was the one guy, James.
Excellent. So let's talk about your trio. First of all, were those names always the ones at the top of the list? And whether or not they were, what particular qualities, and this can be as people as well as, you know, previous work that you were kind of drawn to, what is it about Affleck and Foster and Mara in particular?
Well, Casey was definitely the first when we had the opportunity to take it to a bigger cast. Casey was the first person I wanted to send it to, and pretty much the only one that I really wanted. And at that point, I was still convinced that we should cast someone who was less known or unknown for Ruth's role. And Rooney's agent suggested that we send it to her. And this was right before Girl with the Dragon Tattoo opened. And so I was fairly certain she would never want to go do a tiny independent film after doing this huge international blockbuster that's made her a star. But nonetheless, there was an interesting paradox at work in that she was a star who had complete anonymity because no one knew what she actually looked like. Everyone knew who she was because of the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and maybe some people knew that she was in Social Network as well, but no one actually knew what she looked like, which was a real luxury, both for her and then for me, looking for an actress who could disappear into a part. For Casey, I certainly have been a fan of his for as long as he's been in movies. I think I didn't realize that he was in Chasing Amy at the time, but I certainly remember his scene very well when I was in high school seeing that movie. I remember really loving him in Good Will Hunting. And then when Jerry came out in 2003, 2002, I don't remember what year that was, but I was obsessed with that movie. And I really felt that I don't know, he just had that quality, a quality that I really like in people, which is sort of an easygoing, laid back quality, a mellifluous style of speaking, and I mean, I really love his voice. I just love listening to him talk, the way he uses words, the way he uses language, even when it's someone else's words, when it's someone else's dialogue. I love listening to how he delivers it, and so he just felt right. It really felt like he could play that character. He wasn't a strapping, muscle-bound leading man. He wasn't, a traditional leading man, and that appeals to me as well. I never am that interested in putting, you know, a typical handsome dude on screen in the leading role. I'd always rather find someone who is handsome, but in a more non-traditional way. I think Casey fits that bill, and I think he's an amazing leading man, and very romantic too. I also pulled a lot of ladies in my life and was like, "What do you think of Casey Affleck?" And they all love him. So that is also helpful because of the romantic aspect of the film. Um, and Ben, he was sent the script, and I wasn't. This was before I knew if Casey wanted to do it or not, and so I sent it out to a few more actors who I admired, and Ben was one of them, and he really loved it. But when I met him, I instantly wanted him to play the sheriff because he was in person such a kind and gentlemanly individual, and he had such an old-fashioned sensibility to him that it was something I'd never seen on screen before, and I was tremendously excited once again by the idea of getting an actor to do something they hadn't really done that much in the past, and to take them outside of that comfort zone, whether it's comfort on their part or the audience's, and let them do something new. And so thankfully he said yes as well.
He's quite grizzled as well. I kept thinking of like young Nick Nolte. I don't know why, but like something in. I can imagine his character growing up, being quite embittered to be like. I don't know if you saw Affliction.
Yep.
The Paul Schrader. I imagine him growing up to be Wade from Affliction
And
for
then
whatever reason.
we delve into whatever horrible life he has.
Yeah.
Then led him to become a sheriff and trying. Yeah, he changes himself so thoroughly for every part, and he does it subtly because he came to set, or he came he drove from New York down south in a truck and spent a lot of time just living with sheriffs in Texas and getting to know the land and getting to know the people, and he knows what it's like to be a sheriff in Texas. Like I would never, my script had nowhere near the level of detail that he brought to the part based on the research he did. And over the course of doing that research, he just changed the way he talked, changed the way he moved, and he really transformed his entire personality. Even like his wardrobe was designed to change the way his body looked. And that wasn't something that I necessarily asked for. It was just something that he did because he knew that that's what these guys look like. That's what they do. Here's what they eat. Here's how they walk. Here's how the boots make them walk if they've been wearing cowboy boots for the last 15 or 20 years. And he just brought all of that to the table. And when I saw him for the first time after we wrapped the movie, in New York. He had shaved off that mustache. Somehow he felt like he had lost 30 pounds in the course of like 5 days. He just had completely changed, and he was speaking in his normal voice again. And I'd forgotten that he didn't actually have a Texas accent. And it was really amazing to watch him go back to the normal Ben Foster, because I'd completely forgotten that the normal Ben Foster existed.
You talked about all the Casey Affleck films that you've really enjoyed. I would add to that list personally Lonesome Jim, in the sense that he doesn't talk very much in that film, but you're right, about the quality of his voice. But right away, there's a scene early on in which he's in the cab of a truck with Ruth, and I just got this horrible feeling like, oh, it's like the killer inside me.
Yeah,
in the cab, but it's like the romantic reverse, and thankfully no one gets their face smashed in. But then later, when he's at his friend's bar and he's giving this very impassioned speech about his love for Ruth, I actually thought, well, no, he does have a killer inside him. If push comes to shove, he would go there in a heartbeat. So there's definitely a bit of crossover, I think, and I'm just wondering if visually as well, to a certain extent, the small town setting, and I'm wondering if that film ever came up at all in discussion between you two.
no, it never really did. We never talked about that, or really any of the other films he'd done. We really tried to focus on just what about this story mattered to us. And you can find parallels there. You can find the parallels to Assassination of Jesse James. You can find parallels to Lonesome Jim also, for that matter. But there's not really, you know, maybe it would be different with other people, but for us, we didn't really want to focus on the past. We never talked about and this goes for all of the creative principles, whether it was the cast or the cinematographer. We didn't talk about other movies that much. We just talked about other things, and really tried to start afresh, because all of those references and all of the other material that might have a parallels to this film, it's all going to be there regardless. We digest all of these movies, all of these books, all this music, and it comes out whether we want it to or not. And so I'd always prefer to not talk about past work and to not rely on that, and just start fresh, and knowing that there are going to be those parallels. There's no way to escape it. So we never spoke about. I don't think we spoke about any of his other films while we were working on it. We talked about the stunts and Jerry. That was about it.
There's a quality to Rooney Mara's performance where it's almost as if you could believe that you never talked to her at all. Like, you just switch the camera on and boom, there it is. I mean, she's somebody that we go to the movies to watch actors as these characters, and there's something about Mara. I feel like she's watching me when I'm
You
in a
know,
movie theater.
Absolutely. She is an incredibly intuitive and incredibly observant actress. She pays attention to everything, and she is so alert to the smallest little thing, and that is helpful in terms of directing. I can just say two words of adjustment to her, and she'll understand exactly what I'm saying, and to do that on the next take. But she hangs around, just pays attention quietly to what everyone else is doing, and uses that for her own performance. It's really remarkable to see her on set, and she just doesn't go off to her trailer. She'll just go over to the video monitors. If it's not her shot, she'll watch whatever everyone else is doing, and just get a sense of what is happening in the movie, and what the movie is coming together, how it's coming together, and that is remarkable. Like, she really has, she could. I don't know if she. I don't think she has any interest in directing, but I think that she could do a remarkable job, because she is so attuned to every little aspect of what's happening. I would, one of my favorite aspects of her decision-making process on this movie was some of the wardrobe we had chosen for her looked fine in terms of like when it was hanging on the racks, and it seemed to fit well, but she wasn't quite sure it was right. And she tried it on, and we took pictures, and we were like, yeah, I think this is okay. And the day that we first started shooting with her, she made the judgment call that Ruth would never wear this outfit. She picked out something different, walked up to set wearing that and asked me like, I'll change if you want, but what do you think of this? And it was so perfect and so not what we had expected, that it really clued me in on to exactly how perceptive she was to what she was doing, how she was going to be represented, and what the movie needed to feel like. And I'm not a costume designer. I can't, if something's not quite feeling right, I can't tell you what. I can say that's not right. I don't know what it needs, but I can't tell you what. I can tell you that it's not right, but I can't tell you how to fix it. And she's someone that can fix it, and that is a remarkable thing for an actress to be able to do, not just in terms of wardrobe, but in terms of performance, in terms of the other cast. She's very attuned to every little thing that's happening on set, and that comes through loud and clear on camera.
I wanted to finish up by talking about the style of the film, in that it evokes. We've talked about classics of the 70s, but particularly given the story, Lovers on the Lamb movies. So They Live by Night, Bonnie and Clyde, Badlands again. But of course, what you're doing is in those films, there's a lead up to a robbery, which in this has already occurred, and you keep reading the reviews in which they say they're lovers on the run, but of course they spend 2 minutes of the movie together, 5 minutes opening scenes, and that's it. So was this something that you were kind of conscious of in the writing process, in terms of, I like these films, but I kind of want to play with the tropes and just do something a little bit different?
That's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a very familiar, very traditional story, but tweak it ever so slightly. And the biggest way of doing that was to start at the ending and just draw that ending out. And the movie still is fairly, follows a traditional narrative arc. It doesn't really surprise you with where it goes or what happens in it. But by setting it where, by starting the movie where it starts and focusing on the parts that we focus on, hopefully that is where my own interests shine through and my own perspectives and the side of things that I like to focus on. And we have an entire history of really wonderful movies about lovers literally on the run and crime sprees and bank robberies and prison breaks. And I didn't really feel that I could. I'm sure I could have shot an amazing bank robbery scene and an exciting prison break scene, but I didn't feel that there was any demand for that on my part, at the very least, much less the audience's. I didn't want to watch that again, and I was more interested in seeing what happened afterwards. And that was perhaps selfishly exactly what I decided to do. I was like, I'm just going to focus on the parts that interest me and leave out everything that doesn't feel that's tried and true enough to where we don't need to see it again.
As a fan of film noir, I think one of the most exciting aspects of this film is the nighttime exteriors. I mean, in terms of color film, these are some of the best I've ever seen. I mean, I'm scratching my head actually to think of better. I mean, they're not, for people who've not yet seen the film, these are nighttime scenes that they don't look like the movie equivalent of Night, where you can actually see what's going on. I mean, you really have to crane forward in your seat. The blacks are black, they're deep, velvety, and all engulfing. So, yeah, please tell us about designing that, because it's just really fantastic.
That was one of the very first things that I talked to Bradford Young about, was how we would shoot the night scenes. I really wanted to have the night be dark in a real way, and not one of those fake moonlit night scenes that you so often see in movies where there's a blue light shining from the trees that clearly illuminates everything and is also clearly fake. That's fine for many movies, and it's perfectly serviceable, but I wanted to create something much more tangible and much more naturalistic, but also frightening in its impenetrability. And we spent a lot of time talking about how to achieve that, and one of the things we really wanted to do was to achieve a lot of the look of the film in camera, to not rely on the color timing or the DI. And so we spent a lot of time testing different stocks and different ways of processing the film and seeing exactly how far we could push the negative to achieve this level of darkness that was incredibly rich, incredibly dark, but not underexposed. we wanted there to be information there, to always have color in the darkness, to always have texture, and always be, you know, a full-bodied negative as opposed to a very thin negative with no information. And so it was really, you know, a little bit of trial by error and a lot of research and a lot of, you know, hope that we were actually pulling off what we were trying to pull off. And, you know, the movie, thematically speaking, is about the aftermath of the heyday of these characters' lives. And so it made sense for the movie to get dark. It sort of starts at twilight and gets darker and darker until we get to the end and it's full-blown night. And we wanted that darkness to be all encompassing and to be pervasive and to really become the signature look of the film. And so when you look at a lot of the movie, you know, if you take any random frame, quite a bit of it will be in darkness. Quite a bit of it is relying on shadow to provide definition to the image. But we never wanted those shadows to be, you know, a case of, you know, bad lighting or underlit, you know, interiors. We wanted those shadows to be rich and as you said, velvety and to have the chiaroscuro vibrancy of a classic Renaissance painting. And so it really just, you know, we spent a lot of time lighting the interiors. And when we were outside, we spent a lot of time, you know, with smoke and giant helium balloons, trying to get just the right amount of light shining down on everyone. Sometimes we would shoot scenes right at the crack of dusk, before this, right after the sun had gone below the horizon, but before all light vanished from the sky. So you would get these incredibly beautiful blue night skies that nonetheless were still bright enough to get an exposure on with no actual other light. And it's wonderful. Those moments are like lightless moments. There's no real light there, but there's still enough of an afterglow to get a fully fledged exposure. And that look is something that, you know, you have 5 minutes to get it every day. You don't have a lot of time, and so we would schedule a day so we knew that we could go get shots during that time period, and that look is so wonderful. It's exactly what we were trying to do. We were trying to create a dark, you know, a dark moonless night that nonetheless you could see in, and there's lots of information there. You just have to look. The only downside to that is that if people are watching it at home on TVs that aren't calibrated well,
Yeah.
they won't really be able to see certain scenes. So on the DVD, we're going to put color bars so that you can adjust your TV
Yeah.
and get the settings right so that you can make sure you see everything.
So, well, it really is. Your diligence certainly has paid off because it's such a beautiful film and it has beautiful performances. David, thanks so much for doing this. It's been an absolute pleasure. You know, any guest we have on after this is, you know, you've set the bar already.
Sure.
You've been a great conversationalist, and we wish you the best of luck with Saints. Although something tells me, you know, you're really not going to need it, but
It always helps.
it does. It does. Well, I'll be going a second time this weekend, so you know every little
Fantastic.
helps.
Thank you so much.